The President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, ends his international tour in Barbados with a meeting with the Prime Minister of that country, Mia Mottley. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said today that the Kremlin does not reject a possible meeting between Russian and Ukrainian leaders to hold it if it helps to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. Mali's Prime Minister Choguel Kogala Maiga denounced that recent European Union sanctions against the transitional government are aimed at suffocating the country and generating destabilization. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor Dio Martin from the teleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. The President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, ended his international tour in Barbados with a meeting with the Prime Minister of that country, Mia Mottley. This morning, after visiting the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China and holding meetings with his peers Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, the Argentinian president made a last stop in his tour to meet with recently elected Mia Mottley and representatives of the countries of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. During the talks, topics like climate change and the sovereignty claim over the Malvinas Islands were discussed. Fernandez's meetings with those leaders are aimed at deepening relations with the Caribbean countries and are members of the CELAC. The President of Argentina will return to his country tonight to resume the domestic agenda with the agreement with the IMF as the national government's priority. Argentine justice resumes the trial for crimes against humanity committed during the 1976-1983 military dictatorship. The case is about the atrocities that took place in 3 clandestine centers in the province of Buenos Aires, Pozo de Banfield, Pozo de Quilmes, and Brigada de Lanús. The hearing, which takes place this Tuesday and is broadcast live on digital platforms, is attended by relatives of the victims to give their testimonies. The Federal Oral Court of La Plata, in this case, is judging 18 repressors who acted in those clandestine centers. This case was brought to trial in April 2012, where the human rights group Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, grandmothers of the May Square, led the lawsuit. In Bolivia, the recently created Commission for the Review of Cases of Rape and Femicide will present an investigation into cases of those convicted who have been released by the justice of that country. According to Senator Virginia Velasco, the information will be released within the next 15 days.
But more than anything else, we're going to handle this matter carefully from the Ministry of Government and the Attorney General's office, so we can give answers to the Bolivian people.
The Bolivian senator also pointed out the work of the commission included drafting new laws to optimize the country's judicial system.
If the judge has not responded and has these irregularities, obviously the council will apply sanctions to disciplinary proceedings. If there are elements for conviction determined by the public prosecutor's office, they will also be sanctioned through criminal proceedings.
Today, the Venezuelan High Command of the Bolivian National Armed Forces informed they continue their advance in operations against the so-called Tankal groups, armed terrorists of Colombian drug traffickers. Through his Twitter account, the strategic operational commander of the FAMP, Domingo Hernandez, pointed out that as part of the search and capture operations, infrastructures of these criminal organizations were dismantled and hundreds of explosive devices were deactivated. The main epicenter of the FANB operations is the southwestern state of Apure, with the objective of neutralizing the paramilitary groups that intend to take control of the border to develop their criminal activities. During a recent speech accompanied by the military high command, President Nicolás Maduro stated that in 2022, Venezuela must achieve the total eradication of these paramilitary groups, which systematically try to go in through the border to the national territory. In Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega's administration sent to the National Assembly a bill to approve cooperation agreements with the People's Republic of China. The bill included the agreement signed between the country head of state and Cao Yanming, vice chairperson of the National People's Congress, including the country's incorporation to the Belt and Road Initiative. It also established a visa exemption for diplomatic passport users, service passport, a public affairs or official passport holder, and a memorandum of understanding between the foreign ministries of both countries to establish a political counseling mechanism. The initiative was referred to the Foreign Affairs Committee for its consultation and will be submitted to the Assembly for its due approval.
The objective of this agreement is to strengthen the friendly ties between peoples and government, to develop cooperation in the fields of politics, diplomacy, economy, trade, investment, education, science, technology, health, culture, media, tourism, youth, and sports.
The Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador denounced a campaign by conservatism to delegitimize the governments of Pedro Castillo in Peru and Xiomara Castro in Honduras.
It is evident that conservatism is working against the legal government legitimately constituted. President Castillo won in Peru. I think it's been a month that Honduran President Xiomara Castro won, but it's the same because those who used to dominate feel displaced.
We focus now in Costa Rica as the vote count continues and the National Electoral Authority to provide a final result on Tuesday. On April 3rd, Rodrigo Chavez from the Social Democratic Party and Jose Maria Figueres of the National Liberation Party will face each other in a second runoff to decide the nation's president for the next 4 years. With 88.20% of the votes counted according to the latest official tally, former President Figueres leads the electoral race with 27.26%, while economist Chavez follows with 16.70% of the votes. Following the latest report, electoral authorities announced that abstentionism dropped from 44.1% to 40.29%, which might seem a high number, but still represents a record for general elections since 1953. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said today that the Kremlin does not reject a possible meeting between Russian and Ukrainian leaders and is ready to hold it if it helps to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. During an online session, the official stated that Russia is not against such a meeting a priori and that if it really helps to cut this Gordian knot regarding the current tensions, he quoted, it will be ready to meet with anyone. He reiterated that for such an exchange to take place, it is necessary to define what issues will be discussed and what the ultimate goal is, commented the head of the Kremlin press office. The day before, the Russian president stressed at a press conference with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron that there is no alternative to the Minsk agreements that could solve the Donbass problem peacefully. He also recalled that the current Ukrainian president went to the polls of the presidential elections of that country with the slogan of solving the problem peacefully. A group of U.S. soldiers arrived Tuesday in Romania as part of the military buildup of the nation in Eastern Europe as border issues Ukraine and NATO continue. The deployment adds up to another one taking place in Poland on Saturday after the U.S. announced at the start of this month the sending of 3,000 additional troops to Eastern Europe. This transpires amid a new wave of Western pressures against Moscow, with politicians and media outlets orchestrating an alleged invasion from Russia to Ukrainian territory. These accusations have been deemed by Russian authorities as unfounded, while they've also affirmed they do not seek to be a threat to anyone. Delegations of the countries who will take part in the talks of the Iranian nuclear deal began arriving at the Austrian capital on Tuesday. The encounter in Vienna will unfold after these delegations hold talks with their government supervisors. The Iranian representation insisted in the lifting of the unilateral sanctions imposed by the United States as a key element for rescuing the agreement. Tehran's executive also deemed the step taken by Washington as insufficient. Biden administration's waiver on Friday that lets foreign companies work in civilian projects in Iran linked to the Iraq water reactor, the research reactor in Tehran, and the nuclear power plant in Bushehr. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi said Monday that the conditions are in place to reach an agreement if the sanctions are lifted. In 2018, the United States, under Donald Trump's administration, abandoned the pact on its own to impose coercive measures on the Persian nation. Argentina's Center for Political Economy reported that the recovery of 90% of the private jobs lost during the COVID-19 pandemic. The report, supported by the Ministry of Labor, indicates a 0.3% growth in jobs last November compared to the previous month. Data reveals that at least 167,000 of the 185,000 jobs lost were recovered in the private sector after consequences in the labor sector of the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, 13 out of 15 economic sectors increased the number of workers, among them construction, industry, and hotels. On Tuesday, more than 1 million million students returned to school in Vietnam after 9 months of suspension due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Their return to school undergoes safety measures such as masks and temperature control. According to the Ministry of Health, the measure affects 17.1 of the 22.6 million school children in the country and exempts primary elementary grade students in the two main cities of Vietnam. The return coincides with the end of the Lunar New Year vacations, and for most students it is the first contact with face-to-face classes since schools closed in May. We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Mali's Prime Minister Choguel Kokala Maiga denounced that recent European Union sanctions against the transitional government are aimed at suffocating the country and generating destabilization.
Unfair and savage measures have been decreed with the objective of asphyxiating Mali, of presenting it as a pariah among sister nations, with the unacknowledged and unavoidable short-term objective of asphyxiating the economy in order to achieve, on behalf of whom we know, and by proxy, the destabilization and overthrow of this institution of the transition.
In this context, Mali's premier accused France of having sought the partition of the West African country during its military mission there.
The current authorities also remember the 2013 ban by French authorities to the Malayan army occupying part of the national territory. Indeed, we remember that this intervention, after having initially helped to repel terrorist groups, after that joyful moment, the operation turned into the de facto partition of Mali in a second phase.
Finally, Choguel Kokala Maiga affirmed that France's intervention in Mali divided the country and created a sanctuary for terrorist groups.
We do not confuse the French people and the leaders who have another agenda, who have their own project, which often have nothing to do with what they say, even to their public opinion. They never told their public opinion when they intervened in 2013 that they were going to divide Mali to create a sanctuary for terrorists.
China's foreign ministry on Tuesday condemned the latest planned United States arms sale to Taiwan, saying it seriously undermined the country's security and sovereignty as well as peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. approved a $100 million support contract with Taiwan aimed at boosting the island's missile defense systems amid heightened tensions with China. According to the Pentagon, the funds would be used to sustain, maintain, and improve the island's Patriot missile defense system. Sales included drones, missile systems, and new-generation fighter jets. Taiwan's defense ministry said the decision to obtain newer Patriot missiles was made during a 2019 meeting with U.S. officials in the administration of former President Donald Trump.
The U.S. arms sales to China's Taiwan region seriously violate the One China principle and the three China-U.S. joint communiques, especially the August 17 communique, which seriously undermine China's sovereignty and the security interests and seriously damage China-U.S. relations and the peace and stability of the Taiwan Straits. China firmly opposes this and strongly condemns the United States should abide by the One China principle and the provision of the three Sino-U.S. joint communiques. Immediately cancel the above-mentioned arms sales plan to Taiwan, stop arms sales to Taiwan, and military ties between the United States and Taiwan.
This Monday, China denounced before the United Nations Security Council the excessive use of unilateral coercive measures by Western powers and the serious humanitarian impact on the populations of the affected countries.
We have seen that unilateral sanctions imposed in various names have thrown a monkey wrench in the works of economy and social development and scientific and technological progress of the targeted countries, created an aggravated humanitarian crisis, violated the basic rights of civilians, including women, children, and caused great damage to the harmony and stability of international relations.
Thousands of migratory birds have not made their yearly stop-off in Albania's Divjaka National Park, with experts pointing to climate change, overfishing, and urbanization as likely factors keeping the annual visitors at bay. Scientists and wildlife experts alike sounded the alarm over the drop in numbers made during a recent study that is part of a global program to track migratory patterns of birds across the world. According to the director of the national park that protects the Divjaka Lagoon, some 9,000 water birds are missing compared to the previous year. The head of the national park stated the reasons are multiple, but above all, it is global warming that has disrupted the migration and breeding seasons. Divjaka Lagoon is a strip of marshland off Albania's central coastline that is popular with a variety of migratory species. In the last 10 summers, the Brazilian state of Sao Paulo registered 223 deaths due to the floods. This problem is every time more frequent because of climate change. Specialists assure the situation also exposes the deficiencies of the housing policies in Brazil.
Deaths by flooding and mudslides in Sao Paulo increased by 34, and evacuated or displaced families now tally up for 5,277. According to the United Nations, the heavy rains are 0.3 more frequent and 6.7% more intense. Extreme weather events find an environment vulnerable to catastrophes due to the lack of urban planning and housing programs that today are at the hands of speculative real estate companies.
It is impossible for the people who have minimum wage, even those with two, to access housing programs. So we have no land and no place for people to build their own houses in well-located areas. Add to that the lack of housing policies that include this sector of the population. As a result, there are plenty of irregular areas for the most vulnerable families, territories with environmental frailty, and where the market cannot enter.
After the mudslides, President Jair Bolsonaro blamed the victims. In many of these areas where the houses were built, there was a lack of future planning, just like people build in these at-risk areas out of necessity. Sao Paulo has 132,000 properties in high-risk areas, and João Doria's government uses less than its 2021 budget for infrastructure against floods. At a federal level, Bolsonaro cut off all of the popular housing programs like Minha Casa, Minha Vida. Also, families who benefited from these initiatives launched during Rousseff's administration do not have the resources anymore to keep their houses. 76% of Brazilian families are indebted.
Many families got out of these areas at risk. They went to that housing program, and since they couldn't stay there, they went back to the areas at risk. But once they go back, they happen to do so in worse areas than before.
Extreme weather events are increasingly frequent and mostly affect low-income families who, due to the lack of housing policies, face more and more danger each year in areas of high environmental risk.
We've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. You can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Leo Martin. Thanks for watching.